Retirees are not spending enough in retirement. Yes, you heard it here first. Retirees are not spending enough in retirement. I think the list goes on and on about articles that validate this, actually. And the other side, where retirees are spending too much, we just don't, there's not, I'd love to see evidence. So if you have evidence of retirees spending too much, put it in the show notes, please. Studies that show that retirees have run out of money because they're spending too much in retirement. I'd love to see that. It's got to be more in speculation. Let's see some papers on that, and I'm happy to read through them for sure, because my whole premise is that retirees don't spend enough. In fact, the problem that we have, the reason for that is everyone's so panicked about running out of money, i.e. this retirement crisis, that they stay in their crappy old job too long, and then they go into retirement like, oh, look over their shoulders, oh, I don't want to be a pauper, I don't want my kids to have to change my diaper, and so they don't enjoy their working careers, and they don't enjoy the retirement because the boogeyman is always coming out of the closet to jump on them and eat them alive. And we don't want that. We want you to enjoy your life. You only live once. YOLO. You only live once. So enjoy it. All right, so let's dive into this. Smash, of course. Do that. Do me a favor. Did you smash it? Smash the like button. And then, of course, put a comment down below. Do you think retirees are spending too much or too little in retirement? Do you say too much or too little? All right, so let's dive into this. This again from Journal for Financial Planning. I guess I already threw this one away. I was going through my litany of JFPs, and this one I came across from my man Meir Statman. I'm not sure if it's Meir or Meyer. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but big fan of this guy's writing. And here he had written in the JFP, Journal for Financial Planning, 2018 May, I believe, was a timeline. But all right, so he's the professor of finance at Santa Clara University and the author of Finance for Normal People. His research focuses on behavioral finance. All right, so let's talk about this, because this is critical. A few months ago, I was speaking at a conference about the mental obstacles underlying the consumption gap and how financial advisors can help clients overcome them. The consumption gap is people's actual consumption and potential consumption made possible by their wealth. In a 2016 Journal for Financial Planning paper, Spending in Retirement, Determining the Consumption Gap, Chris Browning and authors found consumption gaps among people with median financial assets, not only among the wealthy, i.e. they're not spending relative to what they could. That's what the consumption gap is. And we know why they're doing that is because they're fearful. Advisor questions following my presentation were not about how to help clients find joy in spending their ample assets and on themselves and their families. Instead, they're about the retirement crisis and the need to encourage people to save more and spend less. Advisor questions for our man, Dr. Statman here. Statman. We're not about helping clients spend more to enjoy the wealth they've been blessed with, but the questions from the advisors, the professionals, were about the retirement crisis and how to get people to save more and spend less. In truth, a drumbeat of retirement crisis, and I can only do quotes on one because my other arm, as you know, is down here in my splint. So the drumbeat of retirement crisis is much too loud. In 2017, Vanguard Research, Retirement Transitions in 4 Countries by a couple of people, reported that 55% of retirees believe there is a national crisis, but only 4% describe their own retirement situation as a crisis. And that just goes back to the 1992 election. I'll never forget that. Clinton and the media were running hard on the greatest recession since the Great Depression. Everybody was a recession. Everybody was one paycheck away from being destitute. Then if you ask people, they did surveys. No one themselves felt they were in that issue, but they thought their neighbor was. And yet the neighbor said, I'm not in that issue, but I'm worried about my neighbor. It was nuts. The same thing here is the media. And unfortunately, the financial advisors buy into this hook, line, and sinker. I don't get it, actually. It's weird. But anyway, so only 55% felt there was a retirement crisis in their countries, but only 4% actually described their own situation as that. These researchers also reported that 90% of recent retirees are able to spend freely, within reason, or cover needs with some discretionary spending, and only 10% said they're on a strict budget. We should distinguish among three groups. One lives in true poverty, another in self-induced poverty. Let's see if I can. Self-induced poverty, i.e., they're so worried about running out of money, they're not spending their money, and they're living in poverty because they're afraid of the boogeyman in the closet who's going to jump on them and eat them alive. And a third lives just right, spending money but not wasting it. Advisors likely have no truly poor among clients because the poor have too little to qualify, and they're not going to pay the fee. But they have many more clients who suffer self-induced poverty. A number of advisors approached me after my presentation, telling me about widows who splurge irresponsibly soon after their husbands die and the dangers of giving adult children money without asking them to pay it back. More recently, I wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal about the mental obstacles facing us as we transition from saving to spending. I've learned much from people who posted comments or sent me emails. These lessons can help advisors improve their practice, benefiting their clients and themselves. And this led me to wonder if advisors fail to see the self-induced poor because they are among them. Now, look, he's talking to advisors who are talking to clients. I'm talking to you directly as a client, all right? I'm just talking to you directly. I'm saying, look, what is the evidence that we're running out of money? Let's see it. Where is the evidence? Where is the evidence? Where is the evidence? If you can show it to me, let's see it. But the evidence is becoming greater and greater and greater on the other end that there's this consumption gap, i.e. you're not spending enough which your wealth would allow you to. Here's a story of a so-called splurging widow. Remember, so advisors said advisors said they were telling this guy about widows who splurge irresponsibly. And now our friend Meyer says, here's a story about a so-called splurging widow. Quote, my husband was reared by extremely thrifty parents who survived the World War II and Great Depression. And through hard work and frugality bordering on stinginess, all Christmas gifts came from the Salvation Army. Man, I know it, man. God bless Salvation Army. I'll never forget, it almost makes me tearful. But anyway, growing up and out of freaking pot to pee in, it seemed like. And then on Christmas, we'd always have these presents under the tree. And I always wondered, as I remember going every single Christmas Eve thinking we're not going to have anything and how embarrassing it was going to be with no toys when all my friends had toys. And again, we were in a poor neighborhood in Peaks Island, Maine. It was all poor. Some were poorer than others, us, but some still at the end of the day, you're always comparing yourself as a kid. I don't have any toys. And I just remember going back to school shopping and whatnot. Anyway, long story short, somehow we always had Christmas presents. And I wake up the next morning and see all these freaking presents. I couldn't believe it. It's like God has spoken and he allowed it to happen. And it was because of the Salvation Army and other groups like that who took care of the poor. Now, this day and age, we go through our church, we do something, Toys for Tots. And nowadays, the kids don't want any of that crap. They want the money. It's completely 180 degrees difference now. And these are supposedly, a lot of them are poor immigrants, too. They don't want the toys. They want the money, and they want the gift cards and whatnot. It's actually sad. Because I just remember growing up and thinking, just going to the bed that night thinking, I hope there's a couple things underneath there. And not only were there a couple things, it wasn't the world's, we didn't have what was it back then? The video game stuff or color TV or anything, but we had a bunch of toys that and presents that was shocking, and it turned out it was the Salvation Army. Our next door, four doors down, the dad of my best friend used to come and deliver it to us. Again, I didn't know that, but it's a lesson, man. It's a lesson to give back because you are affecting children as we sit here today. You might not know that, but a child like me, I can tell you, the feeling of not being able to not compete like a competition, but of being left out while everybody else is opening wonderful Christmas presents. You ain't got nothing. That's tough on a young boy and a young girl too in particular. It's tough. And then to wake up with a feeling of relief of seeing all those toys is just, I cannot tell you how much that was uplifting. So if you have the wherewithal, Salvation Army is a wonderful group to give to without question. All right. So bordering on, this is again the widow. So through hard work and frugality bordering on stinginess, we accumulated a very comfortable nest egg, or his parents did, my husband's parents. They passed on to him their fiscal philosophies, and my husband absorbed them like a sponge. He handled our finances, and once he died, I took over the finances. I was amazed at how much money we had. I shall have to work very hard to spend all of it, but I plan to give my best effort. That's freaking awesome. In the 2.5 years since my husband died, I've been to Africa and made 3 trips to Europe. I've already booked trips to see lowland gorillas in Rwanda and Uganda, snow monkeys in Japan, penguins in Antarctica, and ride a horse across the Mongolian steppes. These trips are booked after my doctor told me that based on her patients, 80 is the age in which people lose their energy and enthusiasm for traveling. I am attempting to get in as many trips as I can before hitting that mile marker. Man, good on you, Mrs. Widow. I freaking love it. And I hope she's not against climate change and CO2, because if she's flying all over the place, she's putting CO2 in the atmosphere. Oh, no! Oh, no, not CO2! You know what I just did? I took a deep breath and I breathed out. What did I do? I just put CO2 in the atmosphere. Because, again, if you're a green and hate CO2, you better not be flying all over the world like this. I've also made many donations to local charities and plan to set up a trust fund for a friend's child who has Down syndrome and would otherwise become a ward of the state when his hand-to-mouth exists and his parents die. My husband never reaped any benefits from his savings habits and only 3 months of Social Security before dying. May others escape his fate. Freaking just blessings to you, miss. I don't know who this lady is. She is just a sight for sore eyes. I could not be happier with what she's doing. Enjoying it and giving the bounty that she has been given from her husband, from her self-frugality, from her husband's parents' frugality. And she's not being a miser like, Scrooge McDuck. She's saying, I'm going to give it away. I think it's freaking awesome. She's giving it away to people who are not kin to her either, a friend's grandson who's got Down syndrome. So to not become a mental ward of the state. Now going back to Amir, we tackle the saving and spending task with the mental tools of framing, mental accounting, and self-control. We frame our money into distinct mental accounts, mainly capital and income. Oh, so right, man. And set self-control rules of savings and spending. Income includes salaries, pensions, interest, and dividends, among other income sources. Capital includes houses, bonds, stocks, and other investments. Self-control tools include automatic transfers from income such as salary to capital such as IRAs, and automatic reinvestment of interest and dividends into mutual fund accounts, and the rule of spend income but don't dip into capital. This author he's on to so much good stuff. He's freaking fantastic. I'd love to see if I couldn't interview one day, because he's hitting on everything. All cylinders are firing away at full throttle. It's freaking awesome. Capital versus income, accumulation, not accumulation gap, consumption gap. We always talk about the accumulation gap, consumption gap. I love it. People who are fortunate to earn good incomes during their working years and employ these mental tools successfully accumulate substantial savings. But these useful mental tools can turn into obstacles in retirement when income diminishes and it's time to dip into your capital. One extremely wealthy man, a retired insurance company exec, wrote in my response to the Wall Street Journal article, I've struggled with boundary issues between income and capital. I've actually taken on a couple board of director assignments so that I feel justified spending for what I consider extravagant, because he's spending from capital, not income. That makes him nervous. So he's got to change the mental accounting, the framework. I'm not spending from capital, I'm spending from income. However you do it, do an income annuity. In this case, he's working part-time at a board of directors to get some income so he can spend the income as opposed to capital. Self-control helps. Self-control is not easy to muster, and some fail to muster it at all. Wants for spending it all today overwhelm wants for saving for tomorrow when self-control is weak. National Football League players enjoy very large income spikes that amount to substantial wealth, but wants for spending today often overwhelm wants for saving for tomorrow. Bankruptcy filings among many NFL players begin soon after the end of their careers. And I challenged that. He didn't say specifically where he's citing that from, but I looked in the research on this, and there's a union guy in 2008 who had just said in an article, a union guy represented the NFL players, that a significant amount filed bankruptcy within 2 years after they quit playing. There's no other evidence of that at all, other than this one union guy. It wasn't like the main union rep. It was just some work guy who said that. And ever since then, it's become lore, as if it's true. And I just have yet to see any evidence of that at all. That's not saying there isn't some of that. I get that. But there's no evidence to say a significant amount of NFL players go bankrupt once they leave the league. Circumstances, especially poverty, can undermine self-control, breeding scarcity and narrowing options. These overload people's cognitive and emotional resources and hamper saving, job performance, and decision making. Poverty is regularly exploited. The most profitable American credit card consumers are those on the verge of bankruptcy. Some people are savers by nature and nurture. The big five personality traits psychologists discuss are conscious. I don't want to. Okay, whatever. I grew up as one of 9 children of Depression-era parents. They always stress education, achievement, savings, and marital happiness over satisfying urgings for material things, says the retired insurance executive. Self-control can be excessive, though. Indeed, excessive self-control is as prevalent as insufficient self-control. Excessive self-control is evident in the tendency to spend less today than our ideal level of spending, driving tightwads to extremes beyond frugality. The prospect of spending money inflicts emotional pain on tightwads, even when it might otherwise be in their interest to spend. I've used this story a couple times. Let me just put myself. I'll never forget this. So I had this nice lady. She was a retired teacher. Her husband, nice guy. They had a couple $1,000,000 set aside. House paid off. Lived in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and they weren't living much. And I'll never forget. They got in somewhat of an argument. They did it not. They didn't include. It was not in front of me, but I could tell there was a level of just tension when they brought up that they should spend more. And I remember telling the woman that she was 5-6 years younger than the husband. He was a pretty big guy. I don't think he's probably not even around anymore. And I remember she said, yeah, whatever his name, Charlie, he gets nervous when I buy a new pair of shoes. And I said, Charlie, you don't, you're fine. You're fine. What's going to happen is that if you don't spend those pair of shoes, you're going to leave that bulk to your kids, and they're going to get hammered from the state tax in the state of New Jersey. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. It seemed like they want to leave to, I can't remember, but the inheritance tax in the state of New Jersey. This is 10 years ago now, by the way. There's no more state tax in New Jersey, and income tax. I said, so spend it, enjoy it, do it while you're alive, because the governor's going to get it, and the government's going to get it if you don't. And I'll never forget that. I could see he was just like, he wasn't challenging me because he was a nice man, very good people. But he was raised in, the same thing, Depression-era parents, raised in Camden, New Jersey, moved to Cherry Hill to escape the crime of the 60s. And it was just worried about running out of money. And it wasn't going to happen. And I just never forget the tension that came up about Charlie letting, Deb buy a new pair of shoes. It was sad. When I followed up with an email to kind of wrap up our conversation, I said, hey, Deb, go buy a new pair of shoes. It's fine. I give you my permission. And I never heard back from him. And I always wondered how that went over with Charlie. Was he pissed off because I was going against his authority to be a tightwad? I don't know. But I just never forget that. It was sad. And it was not good. I'm sure it hurt the relationship. But the issue was they had more income coming in than they knew what to do with, on top of the fact they had $2 million or something like that set aside in various retirement accounts, on top of the fact they had no mortgage whatsoever. It's crazy. This is interesting here. The interplay between emotion and cognition is evident in functional MRIs of people who see a product fall by its price and then are asked to decide whether to buy it or not. Seeing the price causes greater activation in the brain's insula among people who decide not to buy the product than people who do. The insula being the region associated with a painful sensation such as social exclusion and disgusting odors. So when people see a price, it puts that in their tightwads, essentially, the shoes. It puts that in the same category in one's brain as being excluded socially or smelling something disgusting. Another reader wrote, what if the enjoyment is in the saving and the pain is in the spending? And another shared, every so often there are articles of people who have accumulated vast wealth relative to their lifetime income. And when they pass at an old age, people find out they feel sad for them because they live so frugally and never spend it on anything. I sometimes think they're missing the point. The total enjoyment for that person was in the saving and living miserly and frugally and well below one's means. To a certain degree, I am that person. Back to Mir. Moreover, excessive self-control can induce people in a mindset where spending is what irresponsible people do, reflected in this reader sentiment. or statement. I'm saving now because good, admirable, upstanding people sacrifice their current standard of living to save for the future. So if you're not save in the future and are spending the future money right now, you are not a good, admirable, upstanding person, according to that logic, which is sad. We spend less as we age and die sooner than we hope. Concern about running out of money is regularly exaggerated, inflated estimates of life expectancies. Social security tables indicate that on average, only 1 in 10 of today's 65-year-old men will survive until they're 95. Yet one reader wrote, with discoveries in biotech rolling out of labs in droves, we may have reached a technological tipping point as regarding life expectancy. I think today's 60-somethings will live to 100, easy, maybe 110, and their children will probably make it to 150. Reality, however, is still some distance away from the labs. The oldest in the world woman was an Italian who died in April at 117, followed by the oldest in the world man who was an Israeli who died at 113. Moreover, older people spend less anyway, in large part because of physical limitations make them less able to spend and because they're less inclined to spend for personal reasons anyway. According to this paper, How Spending Declines with Age and the Implications for Workplace Pension Plans, spending at age 84 adjusted for inflation is 23% less than it was at 62 among college-educated American couples. Spending on movies, theater, opera, and concerts declined by more than 50% between the ages 60 and 80. Spending on nursing aids, hearing aids, nursing homes, and funeral expenses increased by more than 50%. So basically it's a wash there. One reader wrote, lots of people lose a spouse and do not travel for vacation much because they're by themselves now. They have enough money, but they just do not go anywhere or do much. They have lost their best friend and have not found a second life after losing their spouse. So they sort of mope around just to not do much. It's really sad. I know a few people in this situation have tried to help, but there does not seem to be much you can do for them. We lose not only spouses, but friends, couples we used to dine with and travel with, same-sex individuals we used to golf or shop with. Suddenly we're left to do these things alone and not do them in balance. While we have the resources to seek balance is important to a fulfilling spending and fulfilling retirement. We need not feel guilty about spending our hard-earned savings on ourselves. As one reader wrote, during my career, I was a very conscientious saver and investor. I always maxed out my 401ks and put a large percent of my salary into deferred comp plans. I've had a difficult time changing my mindset from a saver to a spender. This article made me make that mental transition. The first thing I did was go out and get fitted for a new set of ping golf clubs, and I did not feel guilty about it, he said in an exclamation point. Yeah, good on him. Some people derive no pleasure from spending on themselves. Another wrote, if one has never derived pleasure from material things, why would that change in retirement? A cup of coffee or walk on the beach at dawn, and I'm good to go. The psychic income from being oversaved has value. I emphasize with this reader, I too like a cup of coffee and a walk on the beach, even if not at dawn, but why not share oversaved money with family and the needy? Exactly, going back to the thing with Salvation Army. One reader has learned the lesson and wrote, I learned from my mom that the greatest joy in life is giving to your family. She would give something to all of her 6 children, their spouses, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, their spouses, St. Patrick's Day, and no reason at all. If you want the closest thing to eternal life, try this. Yeah, I couldn't believe. Let's see here. All right, so better to give with a warm hand than a cold one. I see this right here. I find to be incredibly, incredibly profound. Better to give with a warm hand than a cold one. One reader faulted me for failing to address preserving capital for the next generation, which is a priority for some of us old people. Why not give money to the next generation with a warm hand than a cold one? I end this story about the so-called dangers of giving adult children money without asking them to pay it back, a danger emphasized by some advisors who approached me after my conference presentation. One advisor stood aside, waiting till everybody had left, and said, I burst out crying when you said it's better to give with a warm hand than a cold one. Indeed, she was crying when she spoke to me. It turned out that she had lent her son $27,000 for college tuition and now demanded that he pay her by the agreed schedule. She reasoned that by paying by schedule would benefit her son, teaching him financial responsibility. But the son was now financially squeezed, at the beginning of his career, lacking even money to buy his girlfriend an engagement ring, and his mother's demands soured their relationship. The mother had more than enough to forgive the loan without imposing any hardship on her, and giving with a warm hand rather than a cold one. I hope this is what she did that day. I hope she shares her story and lessons with her client. It's, what a great article. Better to give with a warm hand than a cold one. And I get this too. Like, I don't know. Look, as a financial planner, I cannot tell you how many people set up these trusts where I don't want my kids to get it till 25% when they're 30, 25% when they're 35, and so on and so on. I said, why? Or I don't want my kid to get till he's 55. And I'm like, at 55, they usually don't need the money. They need it when they're 35. And then if you die and that's part of your trust, because a trust is what sets up where you're controlling it from the grave, you're not showing that you trust your children. You're just not. You're showing that you don't trust them, that you only want them to get the money when they're 55, and they're struggling now. And just don't do that. I mean, there might be a reason not to trust your kids. I mean, I don't know. You might have a kid that's going to sniff it up his nose. I don't know. But don't put restrictions on it from the grave, other than just because that's what some estate planning attorney says. Like, this is what we typically do. 25% at 30, 25% at 40, 20. Don't do that. Or hell, don't wait until they're 60 years old to give it to them, because then why not give it to them while you're alive so you can see it? Now, obviously, don't fly coach so your kids can fly first class. That's what I always say. But if you got the cash and you got the resources, and you know you got a struggling child, and you know he's doing his best, just give him the friggin' money and say, hey, I want to help you out, son. Now, should you do that over and over and over again? No. I had a client up in Rochester, and they kept providing their son capital to start these various business ventures to the point it was going to hurt their own retirement. They were going to run out of money. And they were nice people. And I never forget, they were getting knocked on. Some Catholic university was calling on them to donate. They wanted to give to they were giving their kids money. I'm like, look, I know you guys want to give, but at this stage, your retirement portfolios is you're not going to last. I know they wanted to give. And I said, look, maybe set up some kind of life insurance, a secondary life insurance to give to the Catholic Church. But at some point, you're going to have to cut these people off, because you are going to run out of money, because they still had a mortgage. They still had pretty significant expenditures too. But they just, long story short, I'll never forget, they called me back about a couple weeks later, wanting, I think it was $25,000 from his IRA to give directly to the Catholic University. And look, your money, do whatever you want. I said, that's fine. And then about $15,000. Then a week or so later, they want another $15,000 to give to their son to buy this van for, I don't know, a carpet cleaning business or something like that. And I said, they just could not. They could not say no. Sad. And that's the drawback about giving till it hurts. It's going to hurt in this case, it's going to hurt the kid, because he's not learning that at some point you got to go on your own. But that's the exception, not the rule. The rules that I've seen in financial planning and estate planning is that you withhold the joy you can provide to your children and to your debt. You can't see it. And then your kids get the money when they're not as the same need for it. And they're sitting there thinking, oh man, I could have used this 15 years ago. Better to give with a warm hand than a cold one. What a great article. Anyway, as always, smash what you see. I'll put a link to the show notes. Follow this guy, Mir Stavman. I'm going to see if I can't interview him, because I think he's great. So we'll see you next time.